Greetings, I'm Keith Klein, the host of the VentureFizz podcast, where I interview the most fascinating people in the tech scene. This is episode 390, and today's guest is Maya Saeed, founder and CEO of Outcomes4Me. Maya believes that in our lifetime, we will get to a point where we can either cure or control cancer. That is a bold statement and one of major importance. As we kick off this interview, she shares the reasons why it could happen. In order to get there, however, it is certainly going to take a lot of brilliant founders and innovative companies. But when you have founders like Maya who are building companies like Outcomes4Me, you can see why there is hope. For this podcast, I am blessed to speak with so many amazing people who are all very intelligent, driven, and optimistic, but Maya is in a league of her own. Her academic credentials are beyond next level, and what she has accomplished within the healthcare industry makes her uniquely qualified to build a company that is contributing to this overall mission of either curing or controlling cancer. Outcomes4Me is the first and only end-to-end AI-driven patient empowerment platform that helps patients with cancer take a proactive approach to their care from diagnosis throughout every stage of life and care. Its direct-to-patient platform integrates clinical guidelines, genomics, trial matching, and symptoms tracking to help patients navigate through a cancer diagnosis with confidence and clarity. The company recently announced a $21 million round of funding. In this episode of our podcast, we cover lots of great topics like Maya's background story and her experience in academia at MIT, her transition into industry and the various leadership roles that she held, the full story of Outcomes4Me, including how the platform works and how they help patients, plus their plans looking ahead, the importance of data to speed up innovation and the drug development process, the impact of TV advertising, the overarching theme of what she has learned while building a company, fundraising advice, and so much more. And now a brief word from our podcast sponsor, Silicon Valley Bank. I'm excited to share that this podcast is brought to you by one of the strongest longtime supporters of the local startup ecosystem, that being Silicon Valley Bank, a division of First Citizens Bank. SVB serves innovative tech, healthcare, and life sciences companies, including 60% of CNBC's Disruptor 50 list, 72% of Forbes Cloud 100 list, and 48% of Forbes AI 50 list companies. With more than 1,500 bankers and relationship advisors and $42 billion in loans through Q2 2024, SVB delivers the right people, service, and resources to support your entire financial journey. Learn more at svb.com. All right, without further ado, here's my interview with Maya. Maya, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Likewise, I'm really excited to talk to you because your company raised a new round of funding, Outcomes4Me. So we're going to talk a lot about your company. But before we get into that, I've been talking to a lot of healthcare entrepreneurs, which I'm excited about because there's so much going on. There's obviously amazing work being done, especially as it relates to AI. And it's one of the potential use cases that I'm certainly the most excited about as the potential for AI to do very, very meaningful things for mankind, hopefully curing diseases and, coming up with a cure for cancer, right? And, your company's a big piece of where this is heading. But I wanted to get your point of view on AI's impact on what it could mean for, hopefully coming up with a cure for cancer.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for the question, and thank you for starting here because, as you said, obviously we work in healthcare, we work in cancer. We're excited about what the AI could do on this, and I'll get to your question. But at the same time, like everybody's talking about AI everywhere and how it's going to change all aspects of our lives. And today, I don't feel there's enough conversation and there's enough, really kind of focus on what really AI could do for healthcare. And, in particular, we focus on cancer. And I think this is where the most exciting things are going to happen. Because even before I get to cancer specifically, one thing that's similar across all of healthcare, including cancer, is, and I'm sure you've heard it through the various people you've had on this show, is, in healthcare, we have this situation where, our life depends on getting access to the right care, whether, we're healthy or when we get sick. And just the system itself is not set up to really keep up with, us as people, but also kind of, how quickly we're, having disease or needing to address disease. And so AI on all its dimensions, going from, making the healthcare infrastructure more efficient to really getting to patients is going to fundamentally, I think, help us, and by helping us, it achieves better outcomes. So that's across all healthcare. Um, but let's get to cancer specifically. So there's something very specific about cancer, which is where I think AI could fundamentally help us ultimately get to a cure. We're starting from the beginning, right? What is cancer? Cancer is, obviously some kids get cancer, but is often referred to as disease of the aging. In other words, it's essentially our normal processes that actually are typically used to keep us alive end up going wrong. So, like if you take the example of, our entire living systems, right? All of us live because there's this right level of, balance, if you will, between cells replicating, so growing, and cells dying when they should die. And that's typically via a very controlled death approach, which is called apoptosis. At the very simplistic level, so I'm not talking to a scientist here, I'm talking to a broad audience, cancer is when that balance goes wrong. Cancer is when a cell goes rogue and then essentially starts multiplying. It's no longer kind of, gets all the signals that the body's trying to tell it, and then it grows out of control. And it starts within the organ, that's why we talk about breast, lung, prostate cancer. And then ultimately, if it fundamentally goes really out of control, it goes into metastatic, and so it shows up in different areas of the body. That's essentially what cancer is at the most simplistic level. Now, to understand this, so starting from understanding the cancer, right? It's a very complex system of deregulation. And this is where there's a lot of AI today that's really helping. That's not what we do, but that's really helping in accelerating drug discovery and accelerating finding the right drugs and really kind of helping in that area. And I'm not going to spend much time on that, but I just want to acknowledge that field is super exciting. And that field is also going to get us to a cure faster. Now, the other thing is, it's the reason also I started the company is, and I was just having this conversation just a minute ago with somebody that's a doctor. It's kind of, like in many ways where we are today is we're at this particular point of time where I fundamentally believe that in my lifetime, we're going to be able to, if not cure, control cancer, but hopefully cure and definitely cure some of it. And
Wow.
the reason I fundamentally believe that is, and if you look at the pace of innovation in cancer care, the number of drugs that are making it to the market, the number of clinical trials that are running, we have never been at the more exciting times. So meaning there's many, many drugs that are getting approved and that are making it to market. Also, there's another theme here. Most of these drugs are becoming more and more targeted because we understand better this cancer is going wrong because this signal is no longer kind of being communicated. And now I can actually really target the issue around the signal and kind of go after that specific. So by doing that, a lot of the broad chemotherapy that we've used to treat most of cancer to date become much, much more targeted treatments that then can help us kill the cancer itself and not everything around it. And then you take it to the next level, and this is where immunotherapy comes to play. Then we're also teaching our immune system to start identifying those cells and kill them themselves. Because once you kill the initial cells that you can see, the problem of a metastatic cancer that comes out much later in time is, there are things you don't see. So you want your body to immediately recognize them. Now, here's where the tension comes in. And where AI has there's a huge opportunity here. By having all this innovation come to market so quickly and all these clinical trials, there's really three things that are evolving around scientific innovation. One is more treatments. Two is more targeted. So more targeted means every cancer is no longer one cancer. 30 years ago, 40 years ago, breast cancer was one cancer. Then in the 70s, we discovered tamoxifen, hormone-sensitive breast cancer. We divided it into two cancers, hormone positive and hormone negative. In the 90s, Herceptin got invented, and HER2 became a way to divide the cancer. So now we talk about what's your hormone and HER2 status when it comes to breast cancer. Fast forward right now, there's over 30 different subtypes of breast cancer. This is happening at every single cancer. Now comes the healthcare system. If you take the US, 70 to 80% of people that are being diagnosed with cancer are being treated by general oncologists. This is a doctor that has been trained as an oncologist to treat cancer, but to treat all kinds of cancers, all of them. Now, take all this and put it together. If you look at just last year alone, the guidelines, cancer guidelines, updated, 90 of them updated 200 times. Now imagine what will happen to that doctor to keep up. It's just
Right.
impossible. It's just literally
Impossible.
impossible for us to keep up. So what happens? Well, there's really extremely effective treatments, and some of them in some cancers could be as close as being cures. They're not getting to the right patient at the right time. And so now, how do you really get that? How do you kind of make it so that every person diagnosed with the cancer, or the person around us that gets diagnosed with cancer, we help them get to that retreatment at the right time and help in that relationship with the doctor. This is, in my opinion, where AI very, very quickly is going to have an impact on a huge number of people, a huge number. So again, I can go on, but like there's a lot of exciting
Yeah.
things around AI. And I fundamentally believe we've never been, from both a science perspective, but also a technological perspective, so close to really controlling and curing this disease. And I think we're going to do it in our lifetimes.
That is amazing. And like, I'm such an optimist. So I love it when I talk to somebody that just has this, glimmer of just radiant hope, right? Like that you just like have like in our lifetime, we're going to see it, either cured or controlled or whatever the case may be, which is obviously amazing. Everybody in their lifetime has somebody that's been affected by cancer. So it's just, it's an amazing, amazing time. So, all right, let's talk about your background story. So where did you grow up? What were you like as a child?
That's interesting. So I grew up in Damascus, in Syria. So I grew up there. And I lived all my life up to finishing at 17, I left to come to the States. How was I as a child? You should ask my parents. Here's how I think I was as
I
a
would think you'd
child.
be very curious. Curious is kind of what I
Yes.
would expect.
Yeah, so there's a few things. Curious. I am a middle child, so I don't know if it's a middle child characteristics, but essentially kind of constantly extremely active and looking for attention. I think there's a lot of that in my personality. Uh, I grew up in a family of medical doctors on both sides. That was a very stable. I knew where my parents were, what they did. I could describe it to my friends when I was very little. Some of my friends whose, parents were doing things that are more, business, or that is hard to explain to your friends. So I grew up in a very stable environment, and in many ways, which is, I think is very important to a child, but I felt rebellious. I wanted much more adventure. So extremely, and like I was talking to actually a friend of mine recently. I think there's hyperactive, curious, adventurous, always wanting to do something different, and like many kids, I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to go out, like really kind of into another universe, discover another universe.
All right. So when you came to the US, that was to attend MIT. And so I've been blessed to do this podcast. I've been doing it for something like 7 years, 380 plus episodes. And I talk to some of the most brilliant people, brilliant entrepreneurs and investors. So I'm really grateful for that. When I was going through your academic credentials, I was like, wait a second. I think Maya might be the most, like, your credentials are beyond what I've ever seen as far as my preparation for any interview over those 380 plus guests. I mean, like, it's extraordinary. Your academic at MIT, what you like. So I'm going to run through them real quick, and please correct me if I'm misquoting something here. So undergraduate degree in biology, electrical engineering, computer science, minor in economics, master's in toxicology, electrical engineering, computer science, PhD in electrical engineering, computer science, and systems biology. Did I get all that right?
You did, you did.
That is extraordinary. Like, how does one accomplish all that?
It's so I think one thing that's super important, and it shouldn't, like, it would be a misconception if seen differently. I think what you see is an expression of something you said earlier, which is curiosity and kind of wanting to try new things. Because so first of all, it so happens that with all that background, it sets me extremely well with what I've done professionally in my career. However, I never set out to have those many degrees, and that's not what I wanted when I started. So I came to the US. When I left Damascus, I went to a French school, French education system. As I mentioned, I have both my parents, family on both sides, all of them are medical doctors. And, I thought I wanted to be a medical doctor. That was almost like the default. And because I went into the French system, I had the choice. Do I go to continue in the French education system or go to the American university system? And the only reason I decided to come to the States, haven't obviously gotten accepted at MIT, is because it delayed the decision to go into med school. And the reason is, coming out of high school, I loved math and physics. Like, that was my passion. I really loved it. But I also was curious about, being a doctor. And that decision gets made at the end of high school in the French system. In the American system, it doesn't. So I came, biology undergrad, I knew I wanted to do biology and I wanted to do pre-med. I arrived in Boston in the summer of 94. Now, for many of people maybe that watch your podcast, they were not born in the summer of 94. But for those that were born, 94 to 95 was the year in the US the internet went from being in the academic institutions to actually being opened up more commercially. And it's what propelled the dot-com boom that came after it. So I came in, I have never heard of something called the internet. I come into MIT and I discovered the internet and I get curious. And I'm like, okay, I want to know this thing more. I want to learn about it. And that's kind of, the electrical engineering computer science piece comes in. And actually in those years, in the late 90s, the EECS department at MIT, still so because now there's AI, was a huge magnet, right? So, I did the double undergrad major out of curiosity. Then I finished. And, I'm going to just, I had made the decision that I was interested more in doing a PhD or continue my studies in signal processing and engineering, and that I wasn't going to do medicine. I'll come back to that. And so then I finished, graduated in 98. And then I'm like, okay, I did biology and EECS. I was going to continue in engineering and computer science and signal processing and telecom. And I'm never going to touch biology again. And so I wanted to spend the summer, and I had 3 criteria for it between my undergrad and grad. I wanted to have fun. I wanted to do some, get paid and do some biology, wet lab biology, because I'm like, this is the end of it. And I wanted to learn windsurfing.
That's
So,
awesome.
yeah, so I ended up, actually, again, it's all serendipitous. I ended up getting an internship at Woods Hole Oceanography Institute, which is on Cape Cod, which gives you the housing, the summer, and I learned how to windsurf that summer. And I worked at a lab that was around, now we're in 98, 99, the genome project was still ongoing. And to help pour gels, like a wet biology lab, that was actually trying to find if a gene that we knew worked in humans, existed in humans, existed in fish, to see if it comes, it just determines when we developed resistance to some drugs, etc. Fast forward, end of that summer, we discovered the gene is there. I go back to MIT, and I'm like, I just did this. I'd love to continue, kind of, publish it. And can I do a master's in biology? And the department of the head of biology said, you could do a master's in biology, but a master biology from MIT is not what you want, because typically when the PhD students don't get their qualifiers, we give them the master's. So you want to do a master in toxicology bioengineering. So that's what led me down that route. And then maybe to end this, because I can keep on going for hours, as you can tell, is then I ended up taking all my classes because I needed to take classes in parallel of that master's, in parallel to the Master of Engineering. I took them all in computational biology and bioengineering because I was curious about that area. And that fundamentally led me to my PhD that essentially married signal processing, telecom, applying it to human biology. Like today, there are whole degrees and departments that are organized around that, but at the time there wasn't. And that kind of what brought all of it together.
That's
But again,
amazing.
I mean, long-winded way to say it's serendipitous, it's curiosity, and then you follow just these things. And I think ultimately you don't think too far around. Like I think to me what's super important, and it's also in my entrepreneurial life, is making sure you're making the right decision at that moment. And it's kind of, like, would you regret not having tried that? And that's a theme throughout my life, actually, so far.
And did you always want to go into industry? Like, based on your credentials, a professor would have been academia, would have been an easy career path for you, but you chose to go into industry. Was that always what you wanted to do?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not, because at that point, that's why it's like never say never. When I was a kid, I got electrocuted as a kid. And so I think that created some trauma. So when I kind of was thinking about going to university, I said, I'm going to study everything except electrical engineering. So, like never say never, right? So when I finished my PhD, I really thought I wanted to stay in academia, be a professor. And I happened to be around friends of mine that were finishing their MBAs and applying for jobs. And they were going to all these open houses. Now we're in the mid 2000s. The best thing to do out of an MBA right now, it's actually to join a startup. It wasn't that way before. Was to go to either investment banking or management consulting. So then I'm going with them and I'm like, oh, I'll put my resume. There's also a theme there that I like to take a challenge. I'll put my resume. Fast forward, I get this job offer from BCG, Boston Consulting Group. And then I'm like, okay, my plan was still to go into academia. But then I'm like, okay, I'm going to spend 1 hour in a job. If you haven't been business trained, it's impossible to kind of conceive what's a management consultant job. What are you doing? I mean, you're like, and so I literally thought I was going to hate it, like literally hate it. But I'm like, okay, I'm going to be in the real world before I go back into academia. Again, that's a joke because after I discovered consulting is not the real world. But second, I was, gonna make some good job, a good salary before going back to academia. And then I wanted to publish some papers. So I really thought I was gonna hate it, but I was gonna do it for a year and go back into academia. And the major shift that happened is my very first consulting job, like a project, not job, project. I was being put on a pharma company around really how do we get them to get better efficiencies out of their drug discovery. And that's when I discovered, because I didn't know at the time, how drug discovery worked in the mid 2000s in large pharma companies. The pharma literally, the office, still the case, I'm looking that way because I can see MIT from where I am here, is literally next to MIT. I discovered how the concept of, at the time, high throughput screening worked, which is essentially a blind search. You're blasting to find a drug. And my entire PhD is rational drug design. So here I was, crossed the street, and I felt I went back 20 years in time. And so that's when I discovered that I wasn't interested deeply about science for the sake of science. I was interested in science translating it into an impact on people. And remember, like, I spent a lot of time in engineering and in tech. And in engineering tech, there isn't that dichotomy between what happens in the schools and what happens in industry. But there, in pharma and biotech, in pharma in particular, large pharma, like, it was a void. And I realized that, like, really to kind of translate that to real impact, I needed to be on the industry side. And so that was like a big shift on kind of deciding that really what drove me is not academia. It was making a difference for people. And for me, given my skill set, it is better on the business side.
Well, you eventually worked your way up to a partner role, and then you ended up working in the pharmaceutical companies, like the industry. So what did you
Yeah.
do there?
Yeah. Again, never says never. I remember saying to like a senior partner at BCG, hey, I don't think something is going to be for the rest of my life, but for sure, I will never join any large cap company, period, pharma or otherwise. Of course, what do I do next? And as I join a large cap pharma, I joined Sanofi. At the time, they were also a client. It was at the time when Chris Wiebacher, who's currently the CEO of Biogen, was CEO of Sanofi. Elias Zerhouni, who came from the NIH, was heading R&D. I reported to Elias. And I joined them because they had that vision to essentially, they used to say, we're going to rewrite the R&D textbook. We're going to change how pharma discover drugs. And that's why I joined. And my remit was really around, first at Sanofi, leading strategy and external innovation. It was all about partnering within R&D. It's how do we accelerate drug discovery and drug development? That's really the question we had. In a world where you have a lot of resources, that's what pharma has. But then how do you accelerate the permeation of innovation between what's happening in like startup, labs, tech? And that's what I did for 5 years. Then I ended up joining, then, like you can accelerate innovation and you see, okay, you can get drugs approved. But then I joined Novartis, another pharma company, and I led global market access for the oncology business. And that's when I discovered you can get, and this is, I think, some things going back to your first question on AI, we can get all these drugs in the world out there approved. If they're not getting to the patient, we're not going to improve outcomes.
Right.
So access in a broad sense, not only from a cost perspective, access in general is a huge friction. And that's also where I got extremely deep in oncology, which led me to start the company.
So market access, so your team, your whole division, that the job was to educate doctors on all the treatments and therapies, pharmaceuticals from Novartis?
Well, it's more than that. So the market access function, essentially, it goes from, I got the FDA approval. Now, how do I make sure it gets to patients? So in that system, you need to also get it covered by insurance. So there's also all the relationship with payers and healthcare systems, because I run a global function across the world around how do you pay, like how do you get it reimbursed? How do you get it part of formularies, etc. And then once it gets there, how do you also kind of get people to know about it? Doctors, patients, etc. So it's all of it. But it's not only the doctor-patient side, it's also reimbursement.
Yeah, which that's a huge piece. I mean, that's a hurdle for like healthcare is, I mean, the insurance side is another can of worms.
It's a huge can of worms.
Yeah. I
It's
guess that's
actually
another
complicated in
podcast.
cancer. I don't know that we want to go down that road on this.
Yeah, I know. That's a whole nother discussion.
But I will
That'll
say
be,
one thing. I think it's important because I think in cancer in particular, it's super complicated because in cancer, like you, when you get more innovation, you're gonna more or less may end up with for a short time more cost. But in the longer term, that innovation ends up making everybody better and healthier. And so in the longer term, it does reduce cost, but our health system is not set up to actually benefit from that. And so payers have these kind of, there's that tension in insurance, because if I invest early in the US, chances I'm not going to be with the same insurance company 3, 4, 5 years from now because it's linked to my employer. And then that benefit, they don't get that benefit. So it kind of gets very
right.
complicated very quickly.
I don't know if I have so many questions, but so if someone's doing like a clinical trial study, like how does insurance work with that?
Yeah. So, okay. Clinical trial. So the drug itself and everything that's linked to the clinical trial, typically if it's sponsored clinical trial, so pharma is sponsoring it, it's covered by the sponsor. However, the ancillary services around the trial, you have to go see the doctor. The doctor is kind of, seeing you. It's kind of billing your insurance. Is not covered. The insurance picks it up. So this is where, depending on the insurance, people may not be able to get on the clinical trial because of the insurance itself. That's also where it gets complicated sometimes.
Right. Okay. So then you went to Celsius, which was that more of a earlier stage type of pharmaceutical company?
Well, it process was in parallel. So when I decided to start Outcomes4Me, I left Novartis to start Outcomes4Me. And I left it with that vision where, and I know we're going to talk about Outcomes4Me, but I saw the opportunity to really make a difference in cancer, make a difference with technology. And that's why I left to start. And so I had that vision and I left. And in parallel, through people that I've known in biotech, Celsius was starting. And, it's actually based on something that I'm very familiar with because of the science I kind of use. So in parallel of me starting Outcomes4Me, I also helped Celsius as an acting chief operating officer in the first 2 years of the creation of Celsius. And that's a single cell RNA-seq. It's a biotech. It's a biotech company that recently sold to a pharma company, actually.
I hope you are enjoying this interview. Just a brief word from our sponsor. As a longtime champion in the local startup ecosystem, Silicon Valley Bank supports innovative companies with the solutions and financing they need through every stage of growth. With more than 1,500 bankers and relationship advisors and $42 billion in loans through Q2 2024, SVB delivers the right people, service, and resources to support your entire financial journey. Learn more at svb.com. All right, well, let's talk about Outcomes4Me. So what led you down the path of entrepreneurship, and how did the idea come to fruition?
Okay, so there's different ways to unpack this. So down the path of entrepreneurship, I always felt I'm an entrepreneur until starting Outcomes4Me. And then I realized I have never started a company before until starting it. But the reason I say that, as you saw in my entire kind of path into Outcomes4Me, it's been all like an adventure. And what is being an entrepreneur, right? Being an entrepreneur is kind of, I think first you mentioned you're optimistic. Zephyr, I don't know if you remember Zephyr. So it's kind of, like the instant message when I came to MIT was optimistic way of life. It's like an entrepreneur needs to be optimistic. Like if you don't see like the positive side, you never survive as an entrepreneur. I'm naturally that. Two is like the adventure is not being afraid of the unknown. And this is why I think in this country in particular, you have, I think, an overrepresentation in entrepreneurs of, immigrants, because any person that left everything and came to a different country is not afraid of the unknown. And so that there's also the element of entrepreneurship that is, I think, in any immigrant in general. And then it's kind of, and then it's really around, okay, is there something I could do that's going to make a difference? And then, kind of, like being comfortable with going there, not having all the answers there, but figuring it out. Like they say, it's often you're building the plane as you're flying it. And I would argue that, even though it's a very different trade, management consulting actually deeply teaches you that. Not being
Right.
afraid of a problem that you've never encountered before, because there's different ways to look at it. So I do say that because, I always felt I'm an entrepreneur at heart. But then when I started the company, that's when I realized I never actually, on paper, like depending how you define entrepreneur was. So that's the idea of Outcomes4Me. I think everything we've talked about kind of leads to that. But in particular, when I was at Novartis, so here's the thing around digital health and health technology. If you look at, we as people, technology solves all aspects of our lives, removes friction, except when it comes to healthcare. Think about every time you had to interact with technology as it relates to something that you need in healthcare. It adds friction. It doesn't remove it.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's frictionful. So tech is adding
Yeah.
friction. It's not removing it. And the question is, why is that? And it's because there has not been, we have not delivered, we had not developed a single solution in deep, I'm going to call it deep healthcare. Is deep, a serious disease is a deep healthcare, right? Like that is really focused 100% on helping patients. And the reason for that is a business model problem.
Mm-hmm.
Because anything that's on the consumer side when it comes to healthcare, it is not, how do you pay for it? And you can't have the consumer pay for it because all of us perceive healthcare more as a right than something we're willing to pay for. And that's not going to change anytime soon. And that's very deep. So any company that has, digital health company or health tech company that has attempted, and there's a few of them in the graveyard, to actually create a consumer experience and solve a patient problem and get the money from the patient has not been able to scale. So then you come in, okay, what scales? And then most of health tech today has went to the provider and to the payer. And they're essentially to monetize, right? So kind of to monetize to them. Because if you look at it on the back chunk of things, like providers have a huge chunk of the cost and payers have, and there's a lot to unwind. But if you end up doing that, you end up solving their problem.
Right. Because
And
they're
their
paying the bill.
problem is not the patient problem. It does
Yep.
intersect. So I'm not, underestimating that they're trying to help the patient.
Right.
But it does not, it's not the patient problem. That's why every single tech that you've interacted with, that I've interacted with, that any of us have interacted with, that is coming from a provider, from a payer, from anybody that's pushing it onto, is not a consumer product. And essentially it's frictionful because it has
Right.
not been conceived to help you. It has been conceived to help the rest of the system. So when I was sitting at Novartis, I've always been interested in health tech because that's my entire upbringing. But I've always known the problem is the business model, not tech. And when I was there, I saw the opportunity because I saw this amazing innovation. We just talked about it. And it's kind of, and the real friction is really getting it to the right patient at the right time. Because that's ultimately how you improve outcomes. All these innovative biopharma companies are suppliers into an industry where the consumer is very far removed. It's the patient. And so how do you kind of, remove that friction? And our business, so essentially it started from the conception, there's a business model here. And together, it was at the same time, that's serendipity. At the same time, I had the cancer scare. I didn't have cancer, but I'm going to give you the short version of it. But I became a patient for the first time in my life, serious enough to require open surgery. And that's when I discovered that up to that point, I thought I understood what a patient, because by then I've been in the industry for 15 years. And that's when I realized I had no clue, because for me, it was overwhelming in ways I never anticipated, let alone a cancer patient. And I have no clue what a cancer patient goes through because I haven't been through it. So I can't pretend
Right.
to say I know. So you put these two together, the concept of outcomes for me is very, very simple. Is, when you start a company, you have to believe a number of things, right? As an entrepreneur, you have to believe the problem is worth solving. And here the problem has always been worth solving. So that's not new. You have to believe that you have an edge to solving it and you can scale it. And the timing, more importantly, the timing is right. And all those ingredients were happened when I decided to jump ship and kind of give it a shot.
And how did you get started? Because you did say, okay, there's got to be a business model to pay the bills. There's going to be different parties involved in the whole platform development. And then even just getting started with the tech and, distribution, there's a lot to it.
Yeah. So, and this is again, like each one of us as entrepreneurs are motivated by different things. again, I knew I knew if I could solve that problem, it's huge. It would be a huge company. So then the next question is, what is the first step that I don't know that I need to know to continue to believe? And for me, that first step, because I came from pharma, I came from all that world. I knew the business model was there. I knew all this. I knew all that piece. The first piece that I had to believe is very simple. Can we build a product compelling enough that people will use and will engage with? Because our entire thesis is we're going to build a consumer-grade product that's going to fundamentally help people diagnosed with cancer from the time they get diagnosed until the end of their life, whether, like for the rest of their lives and as they continue thriving in their lives. That's really who we are. And so I started by saying, okay, and first I realized to do this, you have to leave and just give it a shot. And again, that's the theme throughout. And it's like, if I don't try, I would regret not having tried.
Yeah.
And I was naive enough to think in 2 years I'll have the entire answers. But, you have to have, actually, I'll add that to the recipe. You have to be naive as an entrepreneur because, like if you know too much, it's not going to work. And so that first piece of the puzzle, because at the end, these things are puzzles, for us was, can we build this product? Would people engage? And kind of, can we be differentiated? And so we went like against what everybody says when you start a company. Everybody tells you, hey, pick a niche that nobody's in, get something good there, and then expand to where there's competition. We did 100% the opposite. I picked breast cancer. And in the world I just described, breast cancer is by far the most crowded place to go to if this is what you wanted to do. But I wanted to, because it has a lot of things going for patients. It's among all the cancers, it's the one that's most funded, has a lot of advocacy, has a lot of resources. And we wanted to show that even in the most crowded place, people's needs are not being met, and we can create a product that would address them. And that was the first chapter of Outcomes for Me.
And then what was next?
So that was the big chapter, first chapter. The first chapter, we went like very, like I remember just putting a post on Facebook, boosting it. And it kind of said, help us help other patients. Have you been diagnosed in breast cancer in the last 2 years? Help us help other patients. We want to talk to you. Because I didn't want to start from a premise. I know what a cancer patient goes through. We're building a consumer product. And that's also what makes it hard for consumer healthcare. Like, if you're building a Facebook, an Instagram, it's easy. You're the consumer. If you're building something for healthcare, you're not the consumer. Even if you had a history of cancer, you're still not the consumer today, right? And so we started there, and then we got the metrics that made us believe there's something. Chapter 2 was like, okay, now we have a product. We need to get it to more users, and we did our first round of funding. That was the seed round, and then we got it to a number of users. We got the user experience. Then we're like, okay, this is not working. Let's go get it to hundreds of thousands of people. So, again, and that got us to the A round. That was in 2021. And again, we knew the business model is there. So to me, it's not an issue of monetizing. It's kind of growing the network. And then, of course, like the last few years have been very difficult for, VCs and raises. And so, and typically, like the venture world kind of course corrects very fast. Right? So we went from a world that grow at any cost to a world, I want to see profitability before I give you the seed round.
Right.
Right?
Okay.
I mean,
Yep.
I'm simplifying, but that's that. So
Yeah.
then it kind of,
No, the
kept
market
on
did
scaling.
change.
Yeah,
Yes.
it kept on scaling. Yeah.
Okay. So one of the key milestones that I picked up in just doing my research on your company is you were authorized and the only app to integrate with the NCCN clinical practice guidelines in oncology. So explain what that is, and then how did Outcomes for Me as a startup get access to that?
Yeah. So first, I want to qualify the statement you just made. So we are the first and only to date app that take the clinical guidelines, because the word integration matter, and I'll tell you why. Clinical guidelines and integrate them algorithmically so that they become instantaneously computable and patient facing. Again, I just want to make it so that it's
Yeah.
precise.
Thank you.
But what that does, and that's extremely powerful, that essentially helps every person, wherever they are in the world, at their fingertips, know in a way that they can comprehend what the best cancer treatment centers in the world recommend around how their individual case should be treated and which specific drugs are the options. That's extremely powerful. So that's where it makes us extremely unique as a platform.
Right, because this is information that's being it's from 33 leading cancer centers is the ones that are creating this information, and there's a repository. And so how does it work as the consumer experience? So
Exactly. And so let me tell you first how it works as a consumer, and then I could go back to the partnership. But as a consumer experience, is very, very simple. It's you come in, download the app, and then we ask you a few questions that, you can say, I don't know, or they kind of help you, we help onboard you, but we're asking you a number of questions so that we can essentially resolve where you fall into the algorithm. You can also, in the US and Canada, this is not everywhere in the world, in the US and Canada, you can also choose to authorize us to personalize the app based on your medical records. So with that, we get your consent, and essentially we're taking all that so we can give you a better, more personalized options. And then within a few seconds, less than a second, a millisecond, my engineering team will kill me if I say milliseconds, but uh, you get in a very simplistic UI telling you, okay, these are the 3 drugs that are potential options for you at this time. But also you see the entire path. So you see here, you're here. The next thing, could be the possibility. The next thing could be the possibility. And essentially it kind of, gives you that in a very simple way. But in an extremely deep way, that's the power of it. That's actually the power of it, right? And this is where, like, I was talking yesterday to Mike, our CPO, and we were saying, it's not about just the power of the engine, it's about the car, right? Like, you can have the strongest engine if the UI is not there. Nobody's going to use it.
right.
I mean, ChatGPT, LLMs existed much before ChatGPT came. Why did
Yep.
this revolution unleash or start? It's because the UI got there, right? Like, why are now like the greatest designers being, hired or looked for? Because it's all about the user experience. And that's what consumer needs, is the user experience. So again, that's kind of where I think what people miss, or a lot of entrepreneurs and providers and systems miss when it comes to patients and people, is when a person is diagnosed with cancer, they're extremely overwhelmed. So anything that's adding more to that overwhelm is going to be net negative, no matter what's underneath the hood. So the UI and the user experience matters greatly. So that's kind of how it works. So kind of, like I'll just tell you, I was just visiting family in the Middle East, and, like I was with my uncle, and his friend got diagnosed with non-small cell lung cancer, and kind of, he was asking me, is he on the right treatment? And I told him, give me a second. And I took the app and kind of did this, and I looked at his charts, and I said, yeah, and this is why.
Well, I was wondering, like, how does this information feed into your oncologist and the treatment and actual care?
Yeah, so we're all about empowering the consumer, empowering patients, right? Because, and I think this is super important, is at the end, if any person is diagnosed with cancer, the cost of not getting the right treatment for that person could be life and death. Nobody else will bear that level of cost. Nobody else. So they are the most, not only motivated, the stakes are with them. The stakes are not with the doctor. So we want to help them have the right conversations with their doctor, connect them to their doctors, help them with all that, because, like, it has to initiate from them. And also add to that, we've been talking about the cure for cancer. Right now, this is exciting too. A lot of those drugs are becoming more and more oral drugs. They get taken at home. A doctor cannot help you if you don't go see the doctor. So you can have all the technology on the doctor side. Ultimately, if you don't have solutions that are empowering the patients and the people around them, we're not going to cure cancer. We're not. And so it's really, so everything we do, and I think this is important, and that what makes us unique, I think, in many ways, it's really about empowering the patients and giving them the tools to really and connect them to help them in that shared decision making with the doctor, and so that ultimately they can get to the right care.
Yeah, and it's personalized and trustworthy information, which that's key because I'm sure what most consumers do is they jump on Google and they find information that they should never see. Like,
And that's
because
very
it's not
important.
accurate.
Yeah, that's very
It's
important
so
because,
important.
yeah, that's very important because when we started the company, I told you that I had this thing I wanted to make sure actually works. But the other thing we wanted to do, because what's also very delicate is you definitely want to empower the consumer, what we just talked about. But you don't want to marginalize the doctor, right?
Right.
And doctors hate Dr. Google. They hate it, right?
They,
So we
I can only imagine.
Yeah, they hit it. So we spent a lot of time from day one until now working with doctors and providers and asking them and telling them we're about the patient. Patients are our North Star. This is very, very clear. Our focus is very clear. But we want to make sure that this enlightened patient, when they come to you, you kind of are not going to tell them, hey, I hate Dr. Google. And what actually works for doctors is what doctors hate is not an enlightened patient. It's not a patient coming and asking questions. In fact, they want that. But what they hate is if the patient is not coming with the right questions, it ended up being a total waste of their time. A total waste of their time. And time is extremely valuable for the doctor. And then it kind of creates that friction and it's not having the right conversation. So by just having that partnership with the NCCN and what we do with the guidelines, doctors love us. In fact, doctors want us to have, sometimes they use us. So they say, hey, we'd love to have this for us. It helps us.
Yeah, I mean, I think you had a stat, so correct me if this is inaccurate, for oncologists to keep up with the advancements, because they are generalists, or at least some of them are, it would require 29 hours a day to keep up with the information of advancements and everything that's going on.
It's impossible. And it's only going to
Impossible.
get worse. It's only going to get worse. So, and it's kind of, well, first of all, it's only going to get worse. The other thing that's also where this will never stop, of course, AI is going to help. So, there's AI, that's where also it's exciting, and Gen AI, and there's a lot of solutions that are also working on the doctor problem, right? There's some exciting companies out there. But even all those are actually going to solve the problem as long as the information exists. If the information doesn't exist, you can't create it unless you have a platform that's allowing you to collect the data that is missing. And this is the other piece of our platform, is we are at scale collecting patient experience data, both clinical, but also quality of life, and how people are doing on every single drug that is being launched or has been launched. And that's data that doesn't exist in the system.
Right.
And that's why I believe, going back to the beginning of we're going to cure cancer my goal is to cure cancer. And, people tell me, well, you're not a biotech company. How are you going to cure? You don't develop drugs. I'm like, because to cure cancer, you needed to get to the right person at the right time, but also you need to have at scale data that can help you accelerate innovation and get to the cure. And that's what we're going to unlock.
Okay, so this is a perfect segue. So what is the business model of Outcomes4Me, and like how does that information become useful?
Yeah. So going back to kind of the challenges about the business model that's focused on patients, right? If your goal is fundamentally to democratize cancer care and improve outcomes, and you're saying, I'm not going to have that consumer pay. The next thing you want to look at is who's the most aligned with that goal in the entire system. That's where biopharma comes in, the drug innovation industry and the diagnostic industry, because they're in the business of developing drugs and diagnosis to improve outcomes. That's essentially the reason they exist. And then once they've put all that investment, or as they put all that investment, they need to get it to the patient as quickly as possible, because that's also where they can sustain their business model, their own business model. And that's where we become 100% aligned with them too. Because our business model is 100% focused on biopharma and diagnostic companies, on the innovation industry. It's essentially on the industry that's actually bringing innovation to patients. That's our business model. And essentially, it's really around helping them reach the right patient at the right time and understand the patient experience. What does that entail? It entails two things. Reaching the right patient at the right time, it's about, as I mentioned, the more targeted therapies, the more it's around looking for a needle in a haystack. If you're trying to develop a drug, all these clinical trials, impossible to recruit for them, how are you going to find those patients, right? And that's when we come in. If the drug is approved, now it could save so many people's lives. People are not aware of it. How do you help them have the right conversations with their doctor? That's where we come in. Once they are on treatment, all the targeted therapies have what's called on-target side effects. These are predictable side effects. They were part of the clinical trial. There's no better company in the world that knows the effect of these drugs than the actual pharma company that developed the drug. So how do you enable dissemination of that and helping manage patients so that also if there's a symptom, they talk to their doctor? Because there's a lot of data that patients are self-managing. They don't call the doctor early enough. How do you create that? That's all about enabling the drug discovery and development cycle. And then where we accelerate it is the patient experience data. By understanding all these drugs are coming to market. When they were developed comparing it to the best possible option at the time. There's a huge misconception in clinical trials for cancer is people think there's placebo. There is no placebo. That's why being on a clinical trial tends to be the best option in cancer, because you're being compared to the best possible option out there. So all of these trials coming in have proven that they're better than the best possible option out there. By the time they get approved, none of them have been compared to each other, and they've changed the best treatment option. So by the time that they get approved, that best treatment option changed because other drugs got approved. And now you don't know how they compare to each other. That data is not being collected at scale. That data is not helping accelerate innovation. And that's also where we come in, because we're collecting that data to help people understand the outcomes of people currently on these treatments and have these partnerships with biopharma to help them accelerate the next drug so that they don't take the time to say, okay, I don't know how they compare, so let me get the next drug compared to what I know. If we accelerate this, we would shave 10 years of drug development, compound this, that's how we get to a cure.
So another stat from your website was less than 5% of people that have been diagnosed with cancer join a clinical trial study, and 80% are unaware that these options even exist. So obviously your platform is helping fill that void. Is the data that you're collecting, if someone does enter one of the trials, going to the FDA? Like there's like clinical research organizations, right, that are managing the patient studies and their outcomes and effects and symptoms or whatever. And that information is ultimately packaged and going to the FDA for the drug approval process. So is that part of what you're doing too?
Currently, no. In our roadmap, ultimately, yes. And I think, like one of the things, when I started the company, my co-founder is a medical oncologist, but other than my co-founder, who was at Dana-Farber at the time, I did not want to hire anybody from the healthcare background at the time. And the reason, especially in engineering and product, because we wanted to build a consumer product, not a health tech product, right? But then I always tell the team, hey, you're going to touch healthcare. You're going to discover all of it is broken and there's a million possibilities. And if you want to not achieve anything, you try to go after all of them. And that's not going to work. So
yeah, boil the ocean.
Exactly. So that's why we have a very big vision. We have a huge, and we're accelerating towards that vision. But I think the reason we've been successful so far is it's kind of, taking one problem, not necessarily at a time, but like in the right sequence. So what you just
Right.
said about getting it back to the FDA, accelerating approval, definitely is part of our vision. Definitely not doing this right now at this moment.
Now, you have expanded to other forms of cancer, lung, prostate. So obviously, that's the logical step, right? Is just to continue to grow the platform in all these different areas that cancer affects.
Correct. Yeah. So again, I think one of the things that makes our platform super powerful and goes back to the NCC and the clinical trials, everything you mentioned, is at the end, Outcomes for me, the name is because I want to be helpful to you, to me, like to the user. A lot of experiences is kind of, okay, contribute to research, etc. No, we wanted something that could immediately help you right now. To do that, you need to do two things. And we have like essentially principles. We have a design principle. We never ask the person to do anything that we can't help them by doing it at that moment. So we have a whole set of features that are going to be rolled out, but don't roll out until we have the right connections. But second, it's also you have to be extremely deep into the indication to actually make it happen. So we spent a long time in breast. I told you that was the first one. We learned a lot. Then we went to non-small cell lung cancer. That's a mix of men and women, different kind of, needs there. And then we went to prostate cancer. That's men. So also kind of looking for different consumer. And as of actually the beginning of this year, or late last year, we now rolled out across all cancers. So now we're available for
Okay.
yeah,
Wow. I didn't
yeah,
realize that. Okay.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Amazing.
yeah.
So you announced a $21 million new round of funding at the end of May. So, what's the plan ahead?
Yeah, so we did announce the close of the 21 million round of funding, and it's really kind of to do a couple things. Uh, you know, we have essentially the need is huge, and we already have a number of things that are fundamentally working. We know how to get patients on the product in a very predictable way. They're engaged and retained better than anything you've ever seen in healthcare. And we're also starting to kind of, drive revenue in a business model that is sustainable. So we have proven unit economics around our business model to essentially get us to fundamentally scale this. We've done all this with 100% focus on the US. We've done all this where we primarily focused, as you've mentioned, on breast, non-small cell, and prostate more recently. So now with the new round of funding, it's kind of a couple things. One is, obviously, AI and Gen AI is fundamentally accelerating our vision in ways that, like we could go just 100x faster, which is really, really cool, right? So there's a few things there that we're doing. You're going to be seeing live very soon that are extremely impactful that we're doing there. Number two is expanding to all cancers, what we just talked about. And number three is going global. And so actually after that, we also announced that we've acquired an app in Europe that actually has proven it's an intervention, digital intervention that has proven to reduce fatigue in patients with cancer. It's the largest cancer app in Europe. So now we're excited to also, kind of accelerate that across the world. That's also where our business model is really aligned with our patient focus, because in the entire healthcare industry, there's only one player that is global, and that's the biopharma industry. A payer is local, very
Right.
country specific. A provider, same thing. The only global player is the biopharma, so that's where we can go extremely fast.
Right. One of the things, so I still watch TV. I don't, I watch Netflix, but I still watch TV sometimes. And I saw an Outcomes for Me commercial come on the TV, and I was like, wait a second, they have a TV ad. Wow. So I was just curious, like I've heard it's still a very effective channel. Like there's still enough eyeballs on the TVs that it's still a legit opportunity.
Yeah, it's a huge opportunity. And also it's important because, our goal is to improve outcomes and democratize cancer care, right? So to do that, you have to reach people everywhere. Not everybody's on Facebook, Google, on any digital kind of, channel, right? People are watching TV also, and kind of, and especially if you go into, like broader setting, right? So if you really want to reach everybody, We also are now doing print with a partnership with Cure. You have to go multi-channel and not only digital channels to reach everybody wherever they are. So we're excited about it. It's through a partnership with Comcast and BC, and we're excited about that because we're reaching so many patients.
Yeah, it was a great commercial, very effective. So what have you been your biggest lessons? You talk about business models, a, a big component, building like a consumer company and also in the healthcare space.
Biggest lesson? How much time do we have?
Or lessons.
No, I think it's I don't know that I have a single lesson. I think it's many, many lessons. I don't think there is such a thing as like if I were to give you a biggest lesson, I'd be lying. Like I don't think there's one. But I think there's a theme around the lessons. Uh and so it's more kind of maybe a mindset or a theme, right? Like to start the company, you have to be adventurous. Like there's a book, The Hard Things About Hard Things, where in it, I remember when I read it early on in my entrepreneurship life, and kind of, it's still stuck with me. I say it to a lot of people, is like, kind of saying is being an entrepreneur is I'm going to like paraphrase it, but oscillating between two feelings is extreme excitement and extreme depression, and multiple times in a given day. And that's so true. Like that's really, really true. But then I think the biggest theme, or, like what get me going, because it's, like all of us, right? Like this is not true of me. It's every single person that creates something out of nothing or, tries to goes through this, right? And I think what the biggest lesson is kind of to be deep into what keeps you going. And what keeps me going is the reason we created this company and what we're focused on. And really kind of, like no matter what happens, is like always to go back and anchoring that on this. And every person is different. Like for me, I'm an extreme extrovert. So like I kind of create context to remind me of these things to get the energy back up if I'm really deep into the hole. But, like others will be, introvert. They may read the book and get them there. But that's kind of essentially, I think it's more like this. How do you continue to build resilience and kind of manage everything around you while staying true and focused to what you're really trying to do, which is the reason you started this company in the first place.
Well, we talked a little bit about how fundraising's difficult for companies, regardless of maybe progress or wherever they're at. But when I would think about, the traction you have, the credentials you have, what you've already built, revenue, I would hope that investors looking at your company for your latest round of funding, it would be a relatively easy process, but I'm assuming it's not always the case. Like, yeah. So what advice would you have around fundraising? Like, because
Yeah.
your company seems to have it all. So why wouldn't it be an easy check to write?
Because it's never easy. Because think about, like, it's never easy. I think people that say it's easy, it's not. And if you're like, it's never easy for a very simple reason. And then I do think a simple reason, like you have a vision, you have a view, and essentially it becomes a matching game. You have to just find the right person that's going to share the vision and view and see it the same way you say. So, unless you created the company before, unless you're conceiving the company together with an investor, chances are that you're going to need to find that match. And, finding the match is ultimately what makes it difficult. Now, I do have, like, it would be a mistake. Like, I want to make sure also an additional thing. I have never in my entire career felt I was ever at a disadvantage of being a woman in the opposite way, except when I tried to raise funds. So I think but it's multidimensional, it's complex, it's not simple. So, like that's another one for another podcast. But I do say that because it is for any underrepresented demographics, it is more complicated, but it is very complex, right? So, and I think it's more kind of around, and it all comes down to boiling down to a simple thing. You have a clear vision. Any entrepreneur does. You have a view. You know you're going to be successful, and you're just looking for that match. And the fundraising game is all about finding the match as the company continues to grow, and these matches changes with time. And if you simplify it to that problem, it's easier to find a match if you're able to communicate that resonance much quicker. The other thing that makes it difficult is the bigger the company or smaller, it doesn't matter, is like really, really big companies that are successful. They all have the stories that at a time nobody wanted to give them money. Because at the end, like venture still has it has a lot, not a bit, of a herd mentality. And herd mentality does not create breakout companies. So but companies that actually ends up being successful are the companies that historically at some point had the difficult raising.
Yep. No, that's definitely the case. All right. So 3 apps you can't live without. Can't be Slack, email, calendar. So what do you
See,
use?
but it's funny. Okay. Well, first of all, I don't think I can live without apps. I can live without my phone. So spoiler.
That's
I
good.
don't think,
That's
yeah,
good.
I don't think, I think maybe a lot of people can. So, and I don't
It's a good
use a
answer.
lot of apps. Yeah, I don't use a lot of. So if I were to think about, I don't use the apps I use the most, but it doesn't mean like I can't live without them. But like if I'm on my phone is LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook, and for different reasons, right? Like LinkedIn is more professional. I keep up with everything there. Instagram, I keep up with my friends, and Facebook has become more my family is there, so I keep up with the family there. Yeah, because I can't use WhatsApp. WhatsApp would be ahead of those. Is WhatsApp? Can I use WhatsApp or no?
Yeah, that's been more
Actually, WhatsApp
coming
would
into
be
the
the
fold.
number one. No, WhatsApp would be
Yeah,
one that I can't live without. Actually, WhatsApp.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's how people communicate, especially
yeah,
internationally.
yeah. It's WhatsApp.
Um,
Yeah.
so what do you like to do for fun outside of work?
So it's kind of, like, so there's two things, I think, because I don't, you're gonna kill me. I don't like the question because it's like fun outside of work. I think as an entrepreneur, the concept doesn't fundamentally exist because it's your baby and it's kind of, so there's no concept of work. I don't know if that makes sense, but like,
Yeah, I get that.
uh,
I'm down with that. But
yeah.
outside of spending
Yeah,
time
so the
on your
reason I
company,
say
what do you do
that
for
because I'm
fun?
gonna say two things. I'm gonna say two things, and one of them may sound work to you, but it's not. So, like one is I actually love, I love adventure. I love, like so I like driving. I like fast driving, so that's one thing I like. And then
Okay.
the other thing I've gotten into recently because I like speed is skiing. I learned it as an adult, so in the winter I've been doing a lot of that. Uh, but windsurfing I haven't done in a long time. But I like speed, so kind of these things that gives you this adrenaline rush. I like the adrenaline rush. And then the other thing, if I don't get to do these things, I actually enjoy watching stories about people. Like I don't, for example, even read a lot of nonfiction. I read a lot of, sorry, I don't read a lot of fiction. I read a lot of
Same.
nonfiction. I like
Yep.
these stories. I like to watch, documentaries or videos about, like companies, how they were built. I love on the history channels, there's that series, uh, uh, the toys that built America, the industry that built America, all that series. I love those things. I think it's
Yeah,
just they're
same.
curious adventures in my time.
Yeah, like just I listen. I don't read a lot, but I listen to a ton of audiobooks, and it's always a biography, autobiography, or how a company was built. It's I just enjoy it. It's just, and it doesn't have to be business. It could be, a band, a producer, like an actor or something. So, athlete. But well, Maya, thanks so much for taking the time to walk us through your background story. Obviously, all the great work that you and your team are up to at Outcomes for Me, and obviously all the great advice.
But thank you so much for having me. This has been an exciting conversation.